Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi is founder of Shaked Law Personal Injury Lawyers and is ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States by the American Trial Lawyers Association. With a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation cases, he passionately advocates for victims and has recovered multi-million-dollar damage settlements for his clients. My name is Sean O'Connor, and in today's episode, we're talking about truck crashes caused by mechanical failures, like brake problems, tire blowouts, or steering defects. Sagi, good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Let's get into this. Mechanical failures like brake problems or blown out tires. I mean, how serious accidents, how often? Like, is this a common thing? What's your experience?
So you'd be surprised at the amount of trucking cases that we get where it's not just driver error. Think about it. You have a 80,000 pound vehicle when it's a tractor and a trailer and they're flying down that roadway or even driving down the roadway. If they have brake failure, steering failure, coupling failure, whatever they have, that can cause a catastrophic type of event to the person who's in the vehicle. So it happens a lot more than we can think about, unfortunately. And then a lot of it is to do with maintenance. But, a lot of it can be, people think the driver lost control, but it really is a mechanical issue. So underinflated tires, or they negligently maintained it, or never got it fixed, or the brakes are worn. So that's how usually we see some of these crashes, not just driver error, but also error on the part of the company by failing to do what they need to do.
I know we're going to get into some of those details. I'm curious if there's any trend, or are there sort of frequent types of equipment failures that you see?
Yeah, so a lot of the ones we see the most we're talking about brake failures, where they don't check the brakes. And what happens is a truck, we had one call last week where they said the brakes weren't working. And we're going to trial in June where the guy admitted his brakes just weren't working for the type of truck that he had. Tire failure cases where they have sometimes tread separation, or they're not checking the tires. When the tires are bald, it's very dangerous depending on the weather. You can have tire blowouts. A lot of times we see is companies cutting corners and they're mismatching tires. Instead of having, if you're going to replace the front tire, you have to replace both of them. You can't just replace one tire. So there's things that can happen like that. Steering and suspension defects, those are issues that we don't see as much, but we do see them. A lot of times you'll have the reflectors, the lighting reflectors. Remember, a truck is supposed to communicate their presence when they're on the roadway, and when they're not doing it, especially in nighttime situations, there's underride accidents that can happen. And then securement failures, whether it's a cargo securement failure or a coupling. Sometimes you have the fifth wheel issues, or a trailer gets detached. That happens. Or we've talked in the past on other episodes where the load shifts. So all those things are dangerous, and it really, starts with inspections and maintenance. If you do your inspections and maintenance, these types of things shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I'm guessing if being a key word there, because I'm guessing, right, the companies, the trucking companies are, I'm assuming, legally obligated to do the inspections and such. So is it a matter of cutting corners, like you said, or is it just certain things are undetectable? What's the story there?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Basically, what happens is trucking companies are in the business of making money. They're in the business of moving trucks. If their trucks are not moving, they're not making money. So the problem you have is, again, they're 80,000 pound trucks. They're moving, and they're putting every single one of us at danger. And again, I'm not saying all truck drivers are bad and all trucking companies are bad, but a lot of them are. And it causes problems when it's all about the money. So there's federal law in place that talks about inspections and maintenance. So every 150 miles, they have to inspect these trucks. You're talking about the driver doing an inspection and going around the vehicle, checking the tires, checking brakes, checking the lighting, making sure everything works. So when they get on that roadway, that's not going to be the starter for a crash.
Did you say every 150 miles?
Every
Wow,
150 miles. Yeah, they have to do
that's
what's
pretty
called a.
frequent.
It is, but it's for a reason because you have, it's a pre-trip inspection is what they call it,
Hmm.
because there's so many of these cases. I mean, we've had cases where and I think I've spoken this, where the truck is driving and a wheel just flies off and smashes right into a pedestrian that's standing at the corner. Actually, he was standing waiting to buy some food from a food truck.
Wow.
And this wheel just comes barreling at him, and you would think that that would never happen, but it does happen. So maintenance is one thing, inspections are another. Inspection every 150 miles, and then they have to maintain their trucks. It's federal law on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so there must be some, I'm sure we'll get into it, but distinctions between federal law and state law and all of that. But, we're talking about inspections, maintaining, tire maintenance, brake maintenance, and that sort of thing. What about in the case of maybe a defective part or a system of parts? Does liability shift to a manufacturer, or does that not come up?
No, it definitely can. That's a great point. So when you have a defective part, you definitely can look at what they call the OEM, which is the original equipment manufacturer, or sometimes it's the distributor because they make adjustments to those parts. So if it's the brakes that failed, not and you can prove that they were checked often, but it was a defective brake, then you're going to go after the manufacturer. But if it's brakes that weren't, they didn't fail, it wasn't a failure on the part of the product, but because the motor carrier or the trucking company didn't inspect their brakes or didn't have it inspected, and as a result it got worn over time and their driver causes a crash, then the trucking company is at fault. So it really depends on, is it a defective product or is it a lack of maintenance issue? So sometimes it's poor maintenance because a truck that's not moving is a truck that's not making them money. And you can have different parties responsible. Sometimes the driver, sometimes the trucking company, sometimes the place. So where they get the trucks fixed or maintained, they
I
could be
was
on the hook if it's not the same. So it really depends on, we got to get into the weeds of it, which means the truck's got to get inspected. You have to have, if it's a mechanical issue, you have your mechanical engineer. Depending what happened, where the failure was, you have to bring in the right experts.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the, I'm thinking about like the mechanics, or I imagine some of these big companies have um, contracts with maintenance companies, sort of layers of companies that are handling fleet maintenance. So you mentioned, obviously if they're found liable, then they're going to share the blame in whatever the situation is. But in your case, as an attorney, given the complexity, I mean, the multi layers and the different players, how do you go about proving, whether it's a mechanical defect versus driver's negligence versus, an OEM issue?
Yeah, so it all starts first, I would say, with that preservation letter. So in the past, we've talked about as soon as you get that case, send out a preservation letter. So that truck is preserved and they don't make changes to it. They don't make repairs. After you send out that preservation letter, you should be on the phone talking to either the trucking company or the insurance company who's handling the claim and adjusting the claim, and get a schedule of an inspection. You want to schedule the inspection and then you want to coordinate your experts. Now, you don't want to be looking for experts. You should know who your experts are. If you're doing any type of trucking work, it's different than auto accidents. You should have a lineup of certain, experts that you need on cases: mechanical failure experts, trucking experts, human factors experts, accident reconstruction. You should know who they are. And then if it's a unique issue, then you get that unique expert involved. But generally, it's always the same type of issues we see with trucks. And you want to have those inspections early before that truck goes back into maintenance or goes to the junkyard and gets, dismantled for parts. So
Oh,
preservation and preserving that truck is extremely important to ensure that you get, what you need to find out. Again, the physical inspection, turn out which parts failed. You want to find out, do they have the black box data, or what they call the event control module, speeding and braking inputs, fault codes. You want to find out, their braking distance. Crash reconstruction experts will help. Maintenance and inspection patterns. will help. How often do they inspect? How often do they not inspect? So there's a lot of, connecting the dots when you have these cases, but it all starts off with preserving the vehicle and get it inspected right away.
Yeah, my mind goes like a crime drama, with all the, you got to preserve the chain of evidence uh, and all of those factors that you mentioned. You also said black box, and when you say black box, I'm sure I'm not the only one. My mind goes to airplane crashes, where they're looking for the black box. So on these big trucks, they have the equivalent, I gather, huh?
Yeah, so I would say going back to about 1999, right about when I started practicing, we started seeing the black boxes, event data recorders, starting showing up in cars and trucks. Then eventually, it became federally mandated that all cars and trucks have it. And you start seeing now in almost every crash, whether it's a car crash or a truck crash, if there's any type of impact on the vehicle, that data, that black box is going to make a record of what happened. And usually it records about 5 seconds before the event happened. And so you want to get there, you want to download it right away. Obviously, you need someone who knows how to do that. There's companies that's all they do. And that'll give you, like you said, that CSI kind of comment. It gives you a piece of that puzzle that we have, and that puzzle is starting to fill in. So it's always hard to say what happened unless it's like, we have a case right now where our client is sitting in a pickup truck and they have their arrow board, and you can see the arrow board says move to the left. And this 18-wheeler, we have video of the whole thing, is just barreling down, flying down the roadway. It doesn't stop, just smashes them, and there's a huge blow up. So it's on video. There, I want to find out how fast was that truck going. I can see it's going fast on the video, but that download will tell us a lot of what was going on inside that cab with that truck driver and why were they driving so fast. So that's an important piece of evidence.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Excuse me. I mean, I would think too, since you started practicing and, just the ubiquity now of uh, in rig and in pocket cameras, and how that's probably really, in terms when you're talking about reconstructing event scenes, accident scenes, I imagine there's a big focus or an effort to acquire that kind of evidence, huh? And I mean,
Yeah,
that's
there
even
is.
available now.
Yeah, we definitely want the more evidence we can get, the better. So yes, I have been practicing for a while. You're calling me old, Sean, but that's okay. Um, I've been doing it 26 years. We're in 2026, so I'm going on 26 years now. But the evidence that we're looking to collect, aside from that event data recorder, you're talking about the inspection logs. I want to find out what type of all the receipts that the driver has for getting gas. I want to find out every truck stop they've been to, every recording station, every wait station that they've been to. I want dispatch records. I want load records. I want emails and text messages that they have. Some of them use a special platform. I want to know that. I want also the driver's qualification file and all the maintenance records and annual inspection reports. So now, again, we think about it as a puzzle, right? And when you open that box, there's so many little pieces, but now we're starting to put it together, and you really start to find out, is it just the driver, or is this a company-wide problem that they're making their drivers work more than the hourly requirement that a driver should drive? Because then there's fatigue that comes into place. So all these pieces, like you said, the chain of custody, they all come together and they make this puzzle look a lot clearer, and it makes it easier for the lawyer. But if you're not doing that at the beginning, it really causes a problem to try to help understand, is this just a straightforward case, or is there more to it? And if there's more to it, maybe there is what they call a punitive damages angle to the case, but you need to do the legwork up front. And I know a lot of lawyers don't want to do the work, but it requires work, and it's a lot of work at the beginning, but it makes it much easier as you get to trial on these cases.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned and this may be common knowledge. I'm more of a layman in this space, but when you talk about the logs, I'm imagining, and maybe it used to be, I'm sure that a lot of the logs were literally drivers doing like diary entries. Is that still the case, or is it much more of like they're logging in and tapping into an online platform?
So yeah, in the past, when I first started practicing, it was a log that you would handwrite, and then you would keep the logs and also keep your hours of service. They would handwrite those, and there would be a nice chart, and they would chart it out. Now it's not like that anymore. It's all electronic, thankfully. It's harder to um, fudge the records now than it
Sure.
used to be, but they're always creative truck drivers, and they find ways to play games with the inspection logs, with the hours of service. So they're always you always have to stay on top of them because there's ways they can cheat, and that's why you can keep them honest by getting those gas receipts, by getting those toll records, by getting those maintenance records, by getting those load records. You can find out what's really the story, or is the story they're telling us consistent with what's going on with the actual receipts? How can they drive 300 miles in 2 hours? Something's going on there. They're going
Yeah.
pretty fast. And I don't know that trucks are supposed to go that fast if they even can.
Right.
But you'd be surprised what we see.
Wow. Listen, we're coming up on time, but one final thing, just for people that are listening, what advice would you have for an accident victim who suspects that faulty equipment caused their crash? Any short tip?
So, yeah, number one, don't assume it was just an accident, right? There's more to it. And the reason why I say there's more to it, you can have a truck, for example, we have a client that had his leg amputated from a crash. A truck ran him over. He was a pedestrian. And they're telling us they only have $1 million in insurance coverage. If we just stop there, then that's all we would do for the client. But if you look more to it, let's look, was there a mechanical failure? Did something else happen here? Is there something we can show that the trucking company is more at fault, or maybe there's a shipper or a broker involved? So in order to find that information, don't assume it's just an accident. There's more to it in every one of these trucking cases. So immediately get that preservation letter out, preserve the truck, the trailer, all the component parts there. Take photographs of the tires, the debris, the undercarriage, the warning lights, anything that's visible, take photos of, and then be careful about giving statements. I would not give statements until you have that puzzle completed. You're not in a rush to give statements. Don't have your client give a statement to the insurance carrier until you know what took place and until you have a good understanding. This way you can talk to the client. But those are the keys. Don't just assume it's an accident. There may be more to it.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of fascinating to me. Hey, and of course, now we're out of time, but I know we'll talk again. So thanks, Sagi, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And for those of you listening, thank you for being here. And this has been an episode of Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents. So if you've been injured in a trucking accident where mechanical failure may be to blame, visit shakedlaw.com. That's SHAKED law.com to learn how Shaked Law Firm can help. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a review if you found today's episode helpful. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.